Even for the past, even for the past couple of nights, not couple of nights, couple of months, I've been trying to sleep without my phone, and it's been a surprisingly difficult struggle. Um, of course, it's not actually like difficult, but it just slightly more difficult than easy. You know, it's not effortless to do that. It's a real problem, and I feel like a real loser for that. Like, why the I'm not gonna allow myself to put on such a pathetic display. You know. By the way, I only plan on eating two large meals a day to save some time. I'm gonna be quick in the shower, uh, like 4 or 5 minute showers at most. You know, I'm gonna spend some more time at the gym. That's where I'm willing to waste my time. The time that I save in the shower is time that I'll spend in the gym. So no time is saved there. But I won't be spending, an hour plus eating every day. I'm gonna have a big meal with everything I need, and then another big meal with everything I need, and I'm gonna get into the habit of eating that, like really big meals, just two a day, and be real quick with it, and get right back to it. Completely balanced food. I would like to do one meal a day, but I think that's a little much. Really, what I don't want to do is, be snacking throughout the day, like I have this urge, or be eating stuff like in the middle of the night, you know, after my like food digestion cycle is already completed for the day, and it does nothing for me, and none of the nutrients are partitioned anywhere where they got to be. I'm tired of like, you know, it's a real lack of self control right there. What's 11 p.m. Central? 12 a.m. EST. Damn. All right, never mind. I can't teach that guy how to edit. His schedule is never going to line up with mine. Did I? Okay. Looks like I got everything. Everything's ready to go. Let me think. Let me think. There are a few things that I own personally that are not in this room and not in my car. What are all those things? Or on my phone, because in the bank account and things like that, I have things over there. Hmm. My shoes. Okay. That if that's it, then it doesn't matter. There's a couple more things, but it's not necessary that I get them back. Stuff that like my parents have in their safe deposit box. That's for them. You know, old memories and things like that. We don't need the memories. Yeah, that's everything. Everything I own in this room, and in my car, and on my phone. But I guess my phone is in my room, so If I simplify, I can really take everything on the road. How much would it cost though? Because I need a bigger car. What would I need? I'll figure that out later. I don't want to do that right now. I want to budget first. I want to make money first. Let me not do it on that. I saw these videos in my
The wealthiest among us today live a life unparalleled by any other human throughout history. The wealthiest among us today live a life unparalleled by any other human throughout history. The greatest kings and emperors could only dream of the life afforded to today's global billionaires. And it doesn't end there. Even mere multi-millionaires are living through a time where they have access to information, unhindered mobility, and limitless personal comforts. But this is all taking place in a time where a swelling population of people are struggling to make ends meet. The issue of wealth inequality is a hugely controversial one. People from either extreme of the debate advocate for absolute wealth accumulation or bringing back the guillotines. These passionate extremes might be very fun to explore, but in reality, their arguments are just not productive. Wealth inequality is a hot button issue.
Okay, he's an economist, not a philosopher. Every argument is productive.
That is only going to get more divisive as the world gets richer. But is wealth inequality actually a problem? It's never nice to see stories about a billionaire getting their 5th mega yacht while single mothers are struggling to pay bills, but is one actually causing the other? If we were to put emotions and morality away to answer these questions, we would have to look at a few key factors. Why is the world becoming more unequal? Are there any benefits to wealth inequality? Does the wealthy getting wealthier mean average people are becoming poorer? And what are the drawbacks of wealth inequality? This episode of Economics Explained was made possible by...
Wow, economics pierces philosophy quite a lot when you really think about it. Is the zero-sum game? That's a philosophical question, actually. From an economist's standpoint, right? Logically, no. You're taking resources that already exist, combining them in a way, using them in a way that generates more value for the world, and thus more value can be generated for you. But really all you're doing is spending energy. You're spending energy for yourself so that you can live, so that you can eat. You're spending energy to take, you really want to boil it down, you're just taking particles and pushing them closer and closer to ground state. That's really all you're doing. And in that way, it's not only a zero-sum game, it's a negative-sum game. The more and more you do, the less and less you'll be able to do over time. But that's too philosophical for economists. But then again, I mean, if that's too philosophical for economists, it's a simple thing to think about. Economists are pretty stupid then, you know?
Our fans on Patreon. If you would like to gain early access to these videos before they're uploaded
What does his Patreon look like?
to YouTube, as well as participate in exclusive Q&A sessions, please consider supporting our channel on patreon.com/economicsexplained. Perhaps the reason wealth inequality has come to the forefront of the public consciousness in recent decades is because it is becoming more and more severe. Today, the wealthiest 7 people in the world have more collective wealth than the poorest 50%. That's 7 people with more wealth than 3.9 billion people. These people are frustrated that technological innovation has not made humanity richer, but rather it has only made a handful of people richer. Although, that's not entirely correct. In fact, inequality itself is more just a side effect of prosperity. Imagine a tribe living in a time before the first civilizations took shape. These were people using very basic tools and living in groups no larger than 100 or so. These societies had very little wealth inequality. The richest member of such a society might be a chief or an elder. They might not need to go out and hunt or gather as much. They might live in a slightly larger hut and get the first pick of food, but there wasn't a huge difference. In fact, if we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we will see that a majority of the difference came from the more social levels of the pyramid. A majority of this society's time was spent just staying alive. When a society is living meal to meal, there isn't much room for disparity, apart from respect, honour, relationships, and all the stuff that doesn't really rely on technology to produce. If we push this society forward a few thousand years into the Middle Ages, we would find a very similar situation. Now there are kings and lords who live in castles and enjoy a regular diet grown by their peasants toiling in the fields. Inequality has grown because there was more room for it to grow. Society had developed from where humans were basically animals in the wild struggling day to day to survive to basic farmers. This step up in technological prowess gave people like kings and queens and lords the ability to exist. But even the richest and most prosperous king from these times would not hold a candle to the quality of life enjoyed by the average American today. In the modern day, people from developed countries have robust housing with the ability to regulate temperature year-round. They have robotic slaves that do their laundry, and even the bottom dredges of society like grad students have the ability to travel almost anywhere in the world comfortably and quickly. This is of course to say nothing of the miracles in modern medicine or our boundless access to information. The extreme pace of technical innovation over the past
Or like soap, or toilet paper, or plumbing.
3 centuries has meant that quality of life, by almost all metrics, has massively improved for.
Or the ability to propagate in mass information, like the internet, or music. Could you imagine the only times you could ever listen to music are going to the concert and movies and storytelling in books? I can't imagine life without headphones. So, yeah. In what way do I have, in what way can I ever complain about my situation financially? Like, ever. So long as I'm in the United States.
For everyone, but of course, in the same way that farming, steel weapons, and basic architecture gave rise to a class of nobility, the information age has given rise to a modern global upper class. Dingy castles without running water? Ha! Try a 17-bedroom palace with swimming pools, a 30-car garage, and underfloor heating. Gold-plated horse-drawn carriage? How about a private jet that travels 98% the speed of sound? A jet that can get a modern billionaire from anywhere in the world to anywhere in the world in less than 24 hours, all with one phone call to Giovanni the butler boy on a gold-plated iPhone. This is all to say that the absolute pinnacle of wealth in a society has increased as the general level of wealth in a society has grown along with it. In 300 years, it's not inconceivable to think that we will be reading heart-wrenching stories about a single mother who was unable to make payments on her spaceship that she needed to get to her second job on Mars. And this leads us neatly on to the often overlooked benefits of inequality. When the issue of wealth inequality is explored, it's agreed by both advocates and opposition alike that wealth inequality drives motivation to be better, more efficient workers. People wouldn't go through the effort of tertiary education or long arduous careers or even putting in some overtime if there wasn't the promise of higher standards of living. This isn't to say that everyone going to college expects to be a millionaire, but rather they do intend to increase their standard of living through more readily available work, better conditions, and yes, of course, more competitive remuneration. A common counter-argument to this is that often higher compensation can lead to lower performance. A popular study asked people to shoot basketball hoops for varying prizes, from modest sums all the way up to very significant amounts of cash. it was found that the higher the prize was, the worse the expected results
Yeah,
were.
because it's
People
pressure.
have used this practical demonstration to show that wealth inequality doesn't actually produce high performance. But
That's
this
not.
is actually a pretty terrible model for a few.
Yeah, that's not it at all. This is entirely skill based, not strategy based. And depending on your mind state, how much you have on your mind, what you're thinking about, um, the thought process you're having about what you're gonna buy with the money and all this stuff, it will affect your performance. When it comes to things that are drawn out, that you can be deliberate about, that you can take hours to do, or days to do, or weeks to do, a task that would take that much time, and you can focus on it, and you can strategize. It's the complete opposite.
Reasons. The first is that most business is not based on performance in a single moment. If a
Yeah.
life changing amount of money was offered to someone who could throw 10 3 pointers in a row, that person may dedicate a year to do nothing but getting really, really good at throwing 3 pointers. In the same way, if someone was offered $2 million to design a bridge, they might not design a very good bridge because they would be distracted by thinking about the new boat they are going to buy. But if the role of chief engineer on huge civil projects attracted a 7-figure income, you might find that people go to school for many years to get the technical knowledge they need to perform that task. Huge compensation might not make people's performance better day to day, but it does make people far more motivated to attain the skills they need to perform a role tomorrow. The second flaw in this experiment were that the results were dubious at best. Repeat experiments did not find a strong pattern between higher compensation and poorer performance. Okay, so inequality means that people are motivated. Nothing particularly revolutionary there, but what is often overlooked is some of the more subtle benefits of huge accumulations of wealth. The first steam engines were assembled by wealthy nobles effectively as a hobby. The Renaissance and the resurgence of science that came along with it was fueled by the patronage of wealthy families, and modern spaceflight was something that was only made possible by pooling the collective cash of the wealthiest nations in the world. Steam engines, modern science, spaceflight, and a myriad of other developments have all been hugely beneficial to life in the modern world. None of these technological marvels would have been possible if it weren't for the huge concentration of wealth. The idealistic notion of trickle-down economics has been heavily criticised by most economists to the point that trickle-down is actually a phrase used to discredit economic theories. But perhaps it's not wealth that trickles down in the form of cash, rather it trickles down as technical innovation. By extension, if we were to speculate about the future of humanity, it's not inconceivable to foresee billionaires being the bridge between Earth and Mars, bringing along with it all of the prosperity that would come from being a multi-planet species. Now, wealth driving innovation while simultaneously motivating a more productive workforce is great. And most people don't have any problem with individuals becoming wealthy so long as they didn't get there by pushing others down.
That's true.
There is an increasingly popular narrative that the world's modern billionaires are becoming wealthier by pushing others down into poverty. Graphics like this that show a majority of the United States' wealth being hoarded amongst a few certainly back up this idea. The reality of this is rather unsatisfying though. It depends. There are billionaires today that have genuinely added a huge amount of value to society and have been rewarded for it. Think of individuals like Bill Gates. Say what you will about his shady business practices, Microsoft has revolutionized the way that we...
Is this really the best example you can come up with? Because this is a terrible example. Bill Gates has done nothing to further the prosperity of the human race at all, of society at large. He just created something that a bunch of people think they want, but really they don't want it. Really, it makes them miserable. Think about it. All of the technological innovations that Bill Gates has brought to the table has done nothing but made people miserable. It's done nothing but drive people apart. Make people less intimate with each other. Make people more isolated from each other. That's all he's done. ever. But people have such a strong urge to and desire to want the technologies that he brings to the table. That doesn't mean it's good for them. I can offer, a 3-year-old a bunch of sugar all day, the whole day, and they'll do nothing but eat it. They'll do nothing but eat it. And if I offer them enough, days, weeks, months, however long it takes, eventually they'll drop dead. But I gave them what they wanted. And you know what? If I could convince them, they would probably, if I can make them understand that it doesn't even matter. Like, okay, no, I'm thinking of like a 1-year-old, but even like a 2-year-old, if I can make a trade with them and tell them, hey, you give me something of yours, and I'll give you more sugar, they'll give it to me, and I could say, hey, it's a fair transaction. I gave them what they wanted. Yeah, well, I didn't give them what they needed. I gave them what they thought they wanted, but not what's actually good for them. Bill Gates did get rich by putting other people down. He put society at large down. He stripped so many humans of their humanity, of what makes them human in the first place.
Do business. One person with Excel can do the work of 20 bookkeepers with an abacus. The increase in productivity accommodated by this everyday business software has delivered incalculable increases in global efficiency. The same is true for a lot of
Yeah, in global efficiency. Not in prosperity, not in happiness. There's a difference.
other innovators. They got rich by sharing in a slice of the value that they added to society. On the other hand, there are individuals that rightfully deserve some criticism. Intermediaries like payday loan companies, gambling institutions, or black market criminals are clearly claiming more money for themselves than what
Oh, but they're giving people what they want. They're giving people what they asked for.
they are contributing to the collective wealth of society. In fact, to enrich themselves, they are actually making society poorer, which is very clearly a negative.
I mean, both Bill Gates and the casinos are making people more miserable. So there's that. Money is not an end goal, it is a means to an end. To automatically assume bigger number means more prosperity. It's such a brain dead way of thinking.
Outcome. This all exists on a spectrum from radical innovators that massively contribute to society and get rewarded for it on one hand, all the way down to the leeches on the other hand.
You want to know who should have Bill Gates' net worth? The guy who invented copy paste. Copy, cut, and paste. Bro, he influenced the world way more than any of these people. But is he, a billionaire? No.
It is easy to categorize every extremely wealthy person as an equally ruthless tyrant, but this anger probably distracts from the real problem here. It's much more important to stop people getting wealthy from leeching off society rather than stopping extreme wealth altogether. All that being said, even if someone becomes wealthy through the most virtuous of means and makes great contributions towards the future of humanity, it doesn't necessarily mean that the wealth they receive from these actions is going to cause a great benefit. If anything else, it can cause a misguided market. Economists will look at people's marginal propensity to consume and save. What this means is that for every extra dollar someone receives, how much will they spend and how much will they save? Average people spend a good majority of the money they make because, well, living is expensive. There are bills to pay and mouths to feed. Extremely wealthy individuals tend to spend a lower portion of their income though. They spend more overall, but less in relative terms because there are only so many cars and planes and bottles of champagne that you can realistically buy. This means that wealthy people accumulate money. The rich get richer, as it were. Most of the time, these wealthy people will try to invest this extra cash into businesses or real estate or whatever else they think will increase in value to make them even wealthier. But there is a problem. If too many people become too rich, the opportunities for good investments dry up. If a group of billionaires are waiting for the next promising tech company to go public, they're going to start a wild bidding war, driving the price up from something that is reasonable to something that actually makes it a pretty poor investment. The same is true for high-end real estate. Eventually, these people accumulate more money than they know what to do with, which is a problem. They could put it in a bank, but low interest rates make that an unappealing decision. So, they are forced to invest into less and less promising ventures in the hope to achieve some return. This is called a glut, which is a real problem for the economy. A recent paper by the National Bureau of Economic Research and authored by Harvard professor Ludwig Straub talks about the modern savings glut of the rich. In this paper, it is identified that the wealthy elite of the world are running out of safe havens to hoard their vast piles of money. This has only been accelerated by the economic fallout of 2020, which has rocked markets that were once thought to be very stable. A savings glut is what led to the hoarding of mortgage-backed securities before 2008. Today, we see very wealthy investors putting money into companies with no plan to ever turn a profit, simply because they don't have anywhere else better to put it. Recessions are caused by debt.
What do you mean, bro? Put it into good labor. You like the way I like how Koenigsegg makes cars. I love their company. I feel like they're doing something great. I feel like the people that work there are geniuses. I would buy a Koenigsegg. I'd pay $5 million for one of their cars. That's $5 million. I get something incredible and historic in return, which is, you know what? As far as I can tell, there isn't a single Koenigsegg today that's depreciating. Basically, every single Koenigsegg, as of right now, is going up in value. Every single one that has ever been made. I would say it's unprecedented, but there's other car companies doing the same exact thing. I buy a Koenigsegg, I buy a Pagani, I might buy a Bugatti, but I'm not that into Bugattis. Things like that. I would do something I wanted to do. Oh, there's I want to build a incredible like house somewhere, you know. I want to make it beautiful. I want to take this place that I know and love, the city that made me who I am, and you know, make some like put some prosperity in there. I want to start a film production company. You come to me with a good idea for a film, I'll give you the money for it, and everybody in the Discord server who is connected, who knows the people who can budget, the people who are directors and writers and people who can cast and actors and costume and props and editing and all these people, like we can get all these people, we can get the equipment. If I like the idea, I'll invest. And we can make some movies. And I could have my name, movie created by this person. Bro, there's so many ways to spend your money. There's so many fun ways, great fun ways to spend your money and potentially make so much more if you actually spend it right. That blows my mind that like people who are like super rich don't know how to spend their money. Like just call me. I'll tell you how to spend your money. I'll tell you what to spend it on.
And poor investments. These debts and poor investments are facilitated by money.
Create an alternative to YouTube. Create an alternative to other social medias that restrict or compel certain kinds of speech and will ban people for these things and all this stuff like that, you know? These things need competitors. Make a competitor. But, you know, you don't have $1 billion to spend. I can find much cheaper things, you know, because you think you're in a glut, right? You think you have so much money and you don't know what to do with it. You have no idea how brutally quick I can get you to burn through your money.
That has nowhere better to go. Now, an important point here is that savings gluts are less of a problem if it is from the lower and middle classes. For one, lower earners don't have the capacity to hoard quite as much capital as the truly wealthy elites of the world. And two, they have more ability to put it towards smaller scale projects. The world today is full of fantastic investment opportunities, but loaning someone $5,000 to start an online 2D glasses business is just not worth the attention of a billionaire. Even if this business could return a 300% return on investment in the first year, it wouldn't pay for the fuel it took the billionaire's jet to come and see the investment pitch. If $1 billion was spread out amongst 20,000 households though, then these endeavours would find much more traction, meaning that more money would go towards promising, small-scale businesses and less money would go towards not so promising, large-scale businesses. Wealth and power is always going to be a controversial issue. An issue argued back and forth between the words of many who can only make so much noise and the voices of a few who can make quite a lot. Wealth inequality and the misallocation of capital is an issue, but it's not the type of issue that most people think it is. Why is the world becoming more unequal? Because it is becoming wealthier. Are there any benefits to wealth inequality? Yes. Some of mankind's greatest achievements have come from extreme concentrations of wealth. Does the wealthy getting wealthier mean average people are becoming poorer? Well, in some cases, unfortunately, yes. And what are the drawbacks of wealth inequality? Well, they are there and they are serious, but some billionaire spending $200 million on a yacht is not that drawback. If anything, building a yacht is actually a great way to employ yacht builders and crew members. No. Outrageous spending makes for better headlines, but it's not the real issue. The real issue is outrageous investing. Hi guys, I hope you enjoyed the latest video. If you did, please...
But ultimately, buying a yacht is investing. Everything is an investment if you think about it. It's an investment into your entertainment or your ability to show off or whatever it is. It's an investment into something. And just like all the others, you can consider that a bad investment. The problem with all these people is they just suck at investing.
Still, economists warn this recession will be unlike other downturns in recent history.
In terms of GDP loss.
The only thing I can compare to really is not a financial.
I'm not even no. I was thinking about watching this. I heard like that there was enough stimulus to literally have covered like living expenses since COVID started up until now. Like you could have been getting like over $1,000 a month since then. And I'm like, damn, why haven't I been doing that? When I think about it, nah, I'm not trying to do none of that. That's not my game. It's not my game to play. Taking money for handouts, taking money as handouts, no.
1922. Post-war Germany, under the rule of the newly formed Weimar Republic, found itself under significant duress, struggling with the demands of onerous war reparations demanded from them by the victors of World War I. This, combined with domestic stimulus efforts to rebuild a post-war nation, combined with hits to productive capacity like the French occupation of the nation's most powerful industrial centres, gave the government little option but to print more money in an attempt to get their economy working in any capacity. This reckless printing, combined with equally reckless borrowing and the reduction in productive capacity of the nation, saw the value of the German papier mark tank to the point where banknotes were better used as fuel to heat households rather than units of exchange. Hungary, 1945. A nation devastated by the fallout of the Second World War, over half of the nation's factories and businesses had been destroyed, massively reducing their potential to provide a stable standard of living to their people. The government had no choice but to direct more and more money through private banks to issue loans to businesses to rebuild from the ground up. Literally. This reckless money creation, combined with equally reckless borrowing and the reduction in the productive capacity of the nation, saw the value of the Hungarian pengo tank to the point where prices were doubling in the nation every 15 hours. Yugoslavia, 1992. The breakdown of the Soviet Union and an ongoing conflict in Croatia and Bosnia, industrial capacity is reduced, and this slowdown of output is accelerated by a trade embargo placed on the country by the United Nations. To combat this, the government turned on the money printers and made borrowing a lot easier. You might be able to guess what came next. Zimbabwe, 2007.
Jeez, this
a
one was
poorly thought
crazy.
out set of policies saw a mass exodus of capital from the nation, driving down the exchange rate of their dollar. This made importing farming supplies like fertiliser and farm equipment very expensive, which in turn crippled the output of the nation. This, combined with the now infamous Land Reform Act, gave the government little options but to try and print their way out of trouble, to no avail. North Korea, 2009. Farming output was hit by sanctions and a poor year for weather. Money printing, hyperinflation. Venezuela, 2016. Ongoing political instability combined with international sanctions gave the government no choice but to print money in an attempt to maintain generous living standards. This reckless money creation, combined with the massive reduction in output, hyperinflation. In all of these examples, which are just a selection from the last century, there are a few very noticeable common trends. Some kind of destabilising event, be it a war or a natural disaster or a piece of policy that leads to a sharp decline in productive capacity, which is corrected with stimulus measures funded by the printing of money. Unfortunately, almost all of these examples result in some form of failed state. Economic downturns are unfortunate realities, but they are to be expected. Market crashes might sting a few investors and push average people's retirements back a few years, but for those with the time horizon and fortitude of spirit to hold on to a broad portfolio of assets, everything normally ends up just fine. But hyperinflation is different. Almost no economies recover from this diagnosis without some type of massive regime change or the total abandonment of sovereign currency, neither of which are particularly appealing options. Hyperinflation is game over. The United States of America, 2020. The fallout of the coronavirus has hit the nation particularly hard. Over 30 million people have been infected and 500,000 have tragically passed away. While the human cost of this ordeal has obviously been the most devastating, the pandemic has had an undeniable impact on the economy. Millions are still out of work through no fault of their own. Many small, medium and even large corporations have been forced to close permanently. Once stable industries like tourism, hospitality, in-person retail and entertainment have been all but eliminated, and despite hope on the horizon for things getting back to normal, these sorts of industries are not going to be back at full capacity for a very long time. In an attempt to combat this massive drop in economic output, the US has printed more than a third of the active money supply in the economy today within the last 12 months. This money printing has combined with an increase in private sector borrowing and a drop in productive capacity due to the devastation brought about by the global pandemic. If this set of circumstances sounds familiar, don't worry, because apparently it's all going to be different for the United States. And maybe it is. Maybe the USA really is a special economy that is so large and influential that it doesn't play by the same rules as these historic cautionary tales. Or maybe not. But to know for sure, we as always need to look at a few important details. When does inflation actually start to become an unsolvable problem in the economy? Why do people think the USA is immune from the same consequences as all of these other examples? And what is the best way for people to protect themselves against this kind of worst case scenario? But before we get into that, it's time for the big disclaimer that this video will be a case study based on speculations about the future. Don't alter your financial decisions based on a doom and gloom video you saw on the internet, okay? Good. This episode of Economics Explained is brought to its cookie of euro or whatever that we, or at least the market, would be willing to exchange for that item. What is this house worth? Oh, it's $500,000. That new car is 30 grand. The plumber charged me $200 just to unclog my sink, and it's unbelievable that Bitcoin is now consistently trading for over 50,000 American dollars. We base economic value on how much a currency is worth. So, when it comes to assessing the value of that currency itself, things tend to get a little bit weird. You can almost think of the true value of currency as its exchange rate between other things of value. We do this all the time with different currencies, no problem at all. One American dollar is buying $1.31 Australian, 110 Japanese yen, and 85 euro cents. At a stretch, this exchange rate can also apply to other assets. $1 is buying 0.03 ounces of silver, 10 kilos of rice, or 1/60,000th of a Bitcoin. Of course, normally we express these exchange rates the other way around, but you can start to see that market value is almost always expressed as an equation of dollars to goods. So, let's take it back to the relationship between something that we are a bit more familiar with. Let's say the relationship between the exchange rate of American dollars and Australian dollars. As of making this video, $1 American is buying approximately $1.31 Australian, meaning an American dollar is worth slightly more than an Australian dollar. Now, there are a few things that could impact this relationship. Australian dollars could become more or less valuable, or American dollars could become more or less valuable. But even this idea of value could throw a few people off. I prefer to think of this abstract relationship in terms of goodness. If, for example, America falls into total chaos, which I know might be a hard reality to imagine, well, then the goodness of American dollars would fall. This would mean that Australian dollars would increase in relative value despite not necessarily being any more good themselves. 100 Australian dollars could still buy you the same amount of stuff that they did before America fell into chaos, it's just that now you can buy more American dollars with them. Now, moving on from this example that hits a little bit too close to home, let's consider another example. Imagine the relationship between the US dollar and the S&P 500 index. Again, we express this as an equation with one of the units of the index being worth approximately 400 American dollars at the time of making this video. Since the beginning of 2020, this index, which is made up of the 500 largest companies in America, has undoubtedly become less good. Sure, there are a few companies that have benefited from working from home or delivering products to combat the pandemic, but most companies are struggling. Global supply chains have been slowed, making production more difficult, people are moving about less, therefore burning less fuel, and this is all to say nothing of companies directly involved in tourism or hospitality, which are now basically on government life support. It's fair to say that this collection of 500 companies is less good than it was 16 months ago. It's producing less, making less profits, and is far more reliant on government subsidies that may or may not continue into the foreseeable future. It would therefore stand to reason that, all other things being equal, this index would be exchangeable for fewer American dollars today than it was back at the beginning of 2020. But of course, that's not the case. In fact, it's actually exchangeable for 30% more dollars than it was at the beginning of 2020. So, either this equation is totally illogical, or the true value of dollars,
Or humans don't necessarily operate through pure logic.
has fallen faster than the true value of this collection of companies. Now, of course, we normally see an appreciating stock market as a good thing, but again, that's because we measure value from the perspective of dollars. If the stock market appreciates in value, we naturally assume it's because the companies in that market are doing better for their investors. We don't assume it's because our dollar-based frame of reference has fallen. Think of it another way. If the stock market and house prices and wages increase by 50% in a year, we would all think that's a really good thing. But if an average grocery trip became 50% more expensive in that same year, alarm bells would start ringing. Now, of course, normally inflation is measured using one of these relationships between dollars and some kind of asset. But it's not any of the examples that we have seen thus far. Instead, it's a collection of goods and services called the Consumer Price Index. You can find a list of what's included in this index in your own country, and it does vary from country to country, broadly representing the spending habits of consumers in that nation. Now, normally the value of these items is highly correlated in the short to medium term with these other assets. For example, if real estate becomes more expensive, then rent is going to cost more, which means businesses are going to have to charge more to remain competitive, and those additional charges will be registered as increased prices in the Consumer Price Index. But
Bro, I've not been paying attention for the past 5 minutes.
the thing, it hasn't. Inflation has remained comfortably below 3% for this entire money printing ordeal. This becomes even more bizarre when you consider what is going on here. There is demand stocks between these markets. The good news is that a lot of this is likely too much. You better believe that most people are going to spend through their COVID savings pretty quickly. In fact, in a lot of the examples we saw at the beginning of this video, hyperinflation started a year or two after the money printers were first switched on in earnest. Now, there still might be one saving grace for the American economy, and that is its currency status as the world reserve. Now, this term is thrown around a lot, and people will often use it in this debate to argue away the possibility that the US could end up like Venezuela, regardless of how much they let the money printer run. But more often than not, people don't fully understand what it means.
Oh my god, yeah, imagine if the US dollar falls. Every country is going to be hit. That would be insane. If the US dollar is hit like that, China's taken over. And you know what? So is India. Because the Indian population is way, way, way too resilient to let their standard of living and their need for growth falter based on what their currency results in. They'll hustle, jugad, lifestyle. They'll figure out a way.
Back 70 years ago, it really did mean something. Before 1973, American dollars were backed by gold, and the US had by far and away the largest gold reserves in the world. Other currencies around the world were in turn pegged to the US dollar, and hence the dollar was the foundation of all global finance. Today, it means something different. The US dollar is no longer backed by gold, and most global currencies are not pegged to the US dollar and are instead free-floating on the foreign exchange market. Today, it simply means that the US dollar is the most widely held foreign currency by other nations. China alone holds close to 3 trillion US dollars, and total global reserves top 7 trillion. What this effectively means is that the value of the US dollar is not only dependent on what can be purchased within its own domestic market, but also what it can purchase around the world. Let's say you want to buy a commercial order of smartphones from China and import those phones to your home country of Canada, let's say. Well, you wouldn't be able to pay for those phones in Canadian dollars. The Chinese company producing these phones would likely question what you want them to do with your weird maple dollars and request RMB instead. However, if you offered American dollars, they would likely be far more accommodating because American dollars are far more widely recognised. In fact, this sort of deal happens all the time because American dollars are easier to deal with than Chinese RMB. This is part of the way that China has been able to accumulate so much American money. So, the value of American money depends on the productive capacity of the planet more so than the productive capacity of the states. This does genuinely give American dollars some resistance to depreciation, but it's not limitless, and it also doesn't protect the United States from a situation where the entire global economy is impacted, like let's say, a global pandemic. Now of course this isn't necessarily a foregone conclusion, but the writing is on the wall, so the next logical question you might be asking is, how do you prepare for this? Now, the traditional answer to this would be to hold real assets, like precious metals, productive real estate, or even stocks in companies that wouldn't be too heavily impacted by domestic currency fluctuations. New age solutions might include cryptocurrencies, and it's difficult to say that this was bad advice in the past few months. But there is a more direct solution: shorting currency. Now you might ask, how do you do that? Typically, if you want to short something like a stock, you need to borrow that stock from your broker, then sell it instantly in the hope that the price falls so that you can buy the same stock at a lower price to give back to the broker you originally borrowed it from. But how would you do this with money? Well, it's simple. You borrow money. You then exchange that money for some kind of underlying asset, like let's say real estate or a stock portfolio, in the hope that the money becomes worth less, so you can give it back more easily at a later date. Imagine this. You are shopping for
That's very simple. That's just the concept of buying assets, or just buying good assets. I guess in a way you could indirectly say buying good assets is shorting all assets that you don't like.
a new home in Germany in 1920. A lovely flat in Berlin would likely run you about 10,000 pay-per-year marks. Pretty expensive back then, but whatever. The nation was on the up and up under the control of the new Weimar Republic, so you put down a deposit of 2,000 papier marks and borrow the remaining 8,000 with a fixed rate mortgage. Fast forward 2 years and hyperinflation has gripped the nation. This is obviously causing all kinds of issues for day-to-day life, but it presents you with an interesting opportunity. You pick up a single marble off your desk and sell it to a child playing on the street for some of their pocket money. You then take your marble money to the bank and proceed to pay off your 30-year mortgage 2,000 times over. Yes, of course, hyperinflation will cause other issues that still impact your day-to-day life, but ultimately, you now have a place to live for the price of a marble. This is a very extreme and oversimplified example, but it goes to show that a healthy level of debt used to purchase stable assets can be a really good hedge against inflation. The thing is though, wealthy people know this. In an environment where sophisticated investors are anticipating inflation, they will look to take on more debt to invest, especially when that debt can be taken out at record low interest rates. Lots and lots of rich people borrowing lots and lots of money to invest naturally increases the demand for and therefore price of those investments, while also putting more cash into circulation. More money floating around in an environment where everything is being bought up as a hedge against inflation ultimately causes inflation. This video was made possible by Skillshare. Thanks to Skillshare, mastering your craft has never been easier. Their platform provides you with unlimited access to thousands of high-quality tutorials. Skillshare offers a massive library.
This is shocking. I'm only gonna watch one more.
Central African nation is the poorest country, the Republic of the Congo. This Central African nation is the poorest country in the world, with a nominal GDP per person of just $500 US. 71% of the country's population lives in absolute poverty, with no access to clean drinking water, education, medical attention, and even very scarce access to food. This is the highest rate of absolute poverty in the world. These devastating conditions were unfortunately not always the case for this country. Prior to 1960, the Congo was a colony of Belgium and was actually making progress to becoming a developing economy. The Belgian Congo in the 1950s was the second most industrialized nation in Africa, falling just behind South Africa.
Really?
Now, it must be recognised that this country had many of the same social issues that South Africa had during this time as well, but the country was becoming richer, and investments into industries and infrastructure meant that quality of life was improving for everyone. What is more is that the Democratic Republic of the Congo sits on top of a treasure chest of natural resources like precious metals, diamonds, oil, and natural gas. So, where did this all go so wrong? This country had a lot going for it, and while it is hard to say, there was no reason to believe that the Democratic Republic of the Congo could not have developed like so many other economies did during the 1960s and onwards. The truth is, though, that there is a very simple economic reason why this country has fallen so far behind. But to really look at this properly, we must first look at poverty itself. The needs of an economy are stability and confidence. In the same way that a briefcase filled with millions of dollars is pretty useless to a person stranded on a
Things are becoming a bit clearer, a bit straightforward and simple. Seems like there's only one direction to go. I gotta get more money before all this other stuff I want to do. This is it. Gotta get more money. So how to earn more money? to be totally honest with you, if there's one thing I know, it's content. I honestly think the best way for me to make money, as crazy and as like lottery as this might sound, content, making videos. It's pretty much all I know. It's always been all I've wanted to do. I have to get out there. I need to start building a team. I'm gonna sleep. I'm gonna leave my phone on charge right there. And tomorrow, I gotta go return some things on Amazon. And then start building a team and making content. Is there really anything else to do? Let's do this.